Welcome to News for Peace Canada. This morning we have some breaking news for all our viewers. It was a mere 4 months ago that the war in Europe drew to a close, but battles in the Pacific theater have raged on. This morning we were informed that the United States of America, under the presidency of Mr. Harry S. Truman, have dropped the second atomic bomb in the history of mankind on Nagasaki in Japan, a mere 420 kilometers away from their first target in Hiroshima a mere 3 days ago. In light of the recent actions taken by our neighbours down south, we at News for Peace Canada have prepared a short exposé for our viewers on understanding the atomic bomb and what it means for our future. As early as the mid-1930s, there were whispers of the development of an atomic weapon by Nazi Germany. After the discovery of nuclear fission in 1938 by German chemists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann, this was made a theoretical reality. In 1940, the U.S. government took the first steps towards the development of such a project, under the secret military project dubbed the Manhattan Project, under the direction of U.S. physicists Robert Oppenheimer and General Leslie Groves. There were 3 main research and production facilities, and the bombs that would later become known to the world as the Little Boy and Fat Man were assembled in the Los Alamos laboratory. A mere month ago, on July 16, 1945, an atomic bomb was tested at the Trinity testing site in Alamogordo, New Mexico. But it is not the development of these weapons that concerns us here at News for Peace Canada. It is the decision that the leaders of the United States of America took to make this project a reality, the leaders who are supposed to protect their people. But when the destruction of the enemy means propelling mankind into a world where such deadly weapons are a reality, is that really protection? Or are the actions taken by the Americans just the first shots fired in a whole new war that we will all suffer the deadly consequences from? President Truman gave the order to drop the first atomic bomb against the advisement of many of the scientists involved in the Manhattan Project themselves, in the hope that such a violent display of military power would be what would finally cause Japan to surrender. At 8:15 a.m. Japanese time on August 6, 1945, the Enola Gay, an American B-29 bomber, dropped the Little Boy on Hiroshima, the first usage of an atomic weapon in history. 80,000 were killed immediately. Numbers from the bombing of Nagasaki are only just coming in, but they do not seem to be much better. And more died in both cities from fires that followed the explosions. 39% of all the buildings in Nagasaki were destroyed, and the Fat Man, dropped at 11:06 on August 9th, would go down in history as the second atomic bomb ever to be dropped. Thousands died instantly, 40,000 disappearing in just 1 second in Nagasaki. Perhaps the most haunting image about these devastating explosions are the shadows left of those instantly vaporized by thermal radiation, bleaching the land around them but leaving the shadows of where these people stood untouched. Nobody to mourn, no ashes to strew, only a shadow of a human being left to show any evidence of their existence. Those who did not die immediately were subject to horrible burns and an assortment of other injuries, and thousands are dying as you, our viewers, watch this days later. Cases of burns causing patterns of clothing to be imprinted on human skin because of the heat waves of the bomb have been reported. Here's a broadcast of President Truman announcing the bombing of Hiroshima.
A short time ago, an American airplane dropped 1 bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy. That bomb has more power than 20,000 tons of TNT. The Japanese began the war from the air at Pearl Harbor. They have been repaid many-fold, and the end is not yet. With this bomb, we have now added a new and revolutionary increase in destruction to supplement the growing power of our armed forces. In their present form, these bombs are now in production, and even more powerful forms are in development.
If these people were the family and friends of each and every American who is celebrating the Allied victory against Japan today, would we still be hearing cheers? Or then would the harsh reality of what this means for our future become apparent, and would these cheers turn into a slow funeral march, taking us towards our future? There is talk that the Japanese were also in the progress of developing an atomic weapon. In times of war, should we be thinking of the future of humanity on this planet, or should we survive under the motto that our American neighbors seem to have taken on, kill or be killed? From all of us here at News for Peace Canada, thank you and good night. to News for Peace Canada. This month, on the 70th anniversary of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we have launched a research project commemorating the tragedy that we first reported on here at this very station in 1945. When the bombs were dropped on Japan in August of 1945, the world had no way of knowing not only the instantaneous devastation they would have, but also the long-term effects of radiation sickness, environmental concerns, and the legacy they left on the path towards the Cold War in the 21st century. If we, at News for Peace Canada, had any doubts about our stance against atomic weaponry at the time, the devastating long-term effects of this decision made by the late President Truman and his team have firmly proven the dangers of such drastic measures to end a war. Many of those who lived through the initial trauma of the bombing, while shaken and mourning the loss of their cities and peers, thought that with the war over, they were safe. But for many, radiation sickness did not rear its ugly head until weeks or months later, when hair would begin to fall out and bleeding from the gums and symptoms of fever would appear. The picture you see is of a young soldier, hours before his death, who suffered little to no wounds in the actual bombing, but in the month following developed such symptoms. These cases numbered in the thousands, and this young man died 2 hours after this photo was taken by an American Army surgeon. Many others, who had been spared from the initial blast, then began to experience hemorrhaging under the skin, seizures, and other reactions related to the gamma burst. Such deadly radiation killed a further 100,000. The huge amounts of radiation released when the bombs went off caused radiation sickness to plague those for years to come. Delayed reactions include infertility, although luckily the children of pregnant women affected by the radiation of the atomic bombings was largely confined to those who had mothers who were within 2 kilometers of the hypocenter and already far along in their pregnancy. Children of survivors who were conceived after the bombings showed no major increase in birth defects. Blood disorders, increased risk of cancer, cataracts appearing about 3 months to 10 years after the bombings, and other assorted health issues that are still being studied today. Nuclear fallout, or the residual radioactive material propelled into the atmosphere, later came down in the form of deadly black rain on and around Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The combination of heat, carbon residue from fires that had ravaged the cities after the bombings, and nuclear particles made for dangerously radioactive showers. On the day of the bombing in Hiroshima, any black rain that was ingested in the half hour following the explosion contained enough toxic materials to kill someone within 7 hours. These radioactive particles also spread and led to water and forest contamination. Looking back 70 years later, with what we know now of the years that followed the end of World War II, we must not only ask ourselves, was this necessary at the time, but will it ever be necessary again? With the decades of devastation that followed these 2 bombings, one can only imagine the level of destruction that we might see today if nuclear weapons were to be a part of our next World War. We cannot forget the fear that clouded the world during the Cold War, and we cannot afford to let the memories of the completely incinerated and unrecognizable Hiroshima and Nagasaki after the bombings to fade from our minds. In the words of Albert Einstein, who was not a direct participant in the atomic bombings but was instrumental to the beginnings of its development, "I know not what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones." Einstein knew what we here at News for Peace Canada firmly believe. If we allow the horrors of the atomic bombs to become nothing but a part of history, a distant memory, or a chapter in a textbook, we are facilitating the destruction of mankind and of this planet that we call home. Tonight we leave you with a poem by author and survivor Tamiki Hara about the atomic bomb. This is a human being? Look how the atom bomb changed it. Flesh swells fearfully. All men and women take one shape. The voice that trickles from hard black face whispers the thin words, "Please help me." This is a human being. This is the face of a human being. From all of us here at News for Peace Canada, thank you and good night.